Hello class, today we are in chapter 7.3 learning about the moon. Just a reminder before you actually take notes, I did have a link for you with my PowerPoint slides, so if you are taking notes and you think I'm moving too fast, what you can do is just print my notes and just follow with me. If you choose to take notes, you can just pause my video for a second, finish taking notes, and whenever you're done, you can resume my video. But moving on to our lesson, first off, we do have to know about the moon seas. Now, people thought that the moon actually had large bodies of water, and it is because of the plane surfaces. You're gonna see my picture that some of those spots actually look like they have a body of water. So those spots are also known as the flat plains. So the lunar surface is known for spectacular mountain ranges and the flat surfaces. So the black spots that you see on my picture are actually the flat plains. Now, what do we call those flat plains? We call it Maria, also known as seas. Now, we called it Maria because we actually thought it was a body of water. So that's my next bullet point. It says people once thought they were large bodies of water. Now, when did we know it was not a body of water? It's when we actually sent the first astronaut to go and set foot on the moon. Now, whenever they sent the astronaut, they had to name that landing spot, and they called that landing spot the Sea of Tranquility. So that's the large flat plain where they landed. Now, why did they call it the Sea of Tranquility? Is because again, they thought it was a body of water. But whenever they actually landed, they landed on land, not on water. That's when they knew, oh, it's not a body of water, but it's actually land. So that was in 1969. Remember, you have to know that year. So that's 1969. But moving on to the phases of the moon, first off, we do have to know about the solar eclipse. The solar eclipse is when the moon happens to be on the same level as the sun, so the moon passes directly in front of the sun. They do have a quick note for you that they say whenever a solar eclipse happens, do not look directly at the sun, and they say you might go blind. I have not tried it. I am not going to try it, and I do recommend for you not to try it because it might just happen. So do not look directly to the sun when there is a solar eclipse. Now let's go and learn about the first phase of the moon. The first phase of the moon is also known as the new moon, which another name is the invisible moon. It marks the beginning of a new lunar month. So that's going to be the first phase. The first phase is just invisible. You cannot see that first phase of the moon. Now, why can't you see that first phase? Is because it's hidden by the bright light of the day. Okay, so that's our first phase of the moon. Let's go and move on to our second phase of the moon, which is going to be the crescent phase. The crescent phase is the phase of the moon when less than one half is visible. So less than one half can be seen. Now, after that, we actually call it the first and third quarter. It's when exactly one half of its surrounding becomes visible. Not because visible, but becomes visible. So the first and third quarter is when exactly one half of its surrounding becomes visible. So we have the new moon, then we have the crescent phase, then we have the first or third quarter, and the next phase is going to be the gibbous phase. So the gibbous phase, also known as the bulging phase, means that over one half of its sunlit side can be seen from the earth. So more than half can be seen. So we start from an invisible phase to less than a half, then exactly a half, and then we move on to more than a half. That means our last phase is going to be what? Whenever we see the entire moon, and that's when we call it the full moon, having the entire surface of its near side clearly visible. That's when we see the entire moon. So we start with an invisible and then we end with a full moon. Now, before I move on though, We did learn about the solar eclipse. Now let's go and learn about the lunar eclipse. That's whenever the moon travels through the Earth's shadow. So we have two different eclipses. One whenever the moon passes directly in front of the sun, and the lunar eclipse is going to be whenever the moon travels through the Earth's shadow. Now, as you can see though, from whenever it goes from the invisible moon to the full moon, our moon is kind of growing. And whenever it goes from the full moon to the new moon back again, it is like our moon is getting smaller. So it's like a cycle. Now, what do we call when it grows? What do we call when the moon grows? We actually call it waxing. So waxes, it grows larger. The moon progresses from a new to a full. That's when our moon will grow larger. Now, what do we call it when our moon will grow smaller? We call it waning. It wanes, it grows smaller. Our moon progresses from full back to new. So from new to full, we call it waxing. And from full to new, we call it waning. So new to full, waxing, full to new, waning. We do have to know those two differences. In addition, we do have to know the phases of the moon. So we are actually going to read chapter 7.3 and do our reading comprehension check. And that is something you do have to submit through Class Dojo activity. Now, I do have another activity for you. It's not a required activity. It's an optional activity. You can grab some Oreos, and you can actually try to create the phases of the moon using Oreos.